welcome you, and thank you for taking your 5 o'clock hour to come here. I know you probably had a long day, and we'll try and make it worth your while. My name is Robert Peterson. I'm a senior product manager in Windows Embedded at Microsoft, and joining me is Eric Kamont. He is a solution specialist also with Microsoft. So I just kind of want to tell you what we're going to be going over. I'll be giving over kind of a high-level overview to kind of explain what we're seeing as trends in the marketplace regarding embedded devices with OEMs and with enterprises, and kind of our thinking behind the product and what it is and what we're going to be delivering. And then Eric is going to go through a much more technical demo, and assuming the demo gods are friendly today versus yesterday, you will see the demo. And if not, he assures me he can do hand puppets that really mimic the whole management and configuration. It's really quite something. So I'd like to first, who here is familiar with embedded devices at all? Well, that's good. All right. So you're probably at the right session then. What we'd like to cover is really what are embedded devices, and specifically why is managing them a challenge. And then we also want to cover what our product Windows Embedded Device Manager 2011 is. So what we hope you take away is how you can solve the challenges of managing embedded devices, and specifically what this product can do for you and how it can provide a solution. So for those who might not be familiar with what Windows Embedded or embedded devices are, they're growing, and it's huge. There's hundreds of millions of PCs. There's about a billion, maybe a couple billion phones, but there are literally tens of billions of specialized devices. And they can range from anything from the thin clients you see in your hands-on labs to digital signage. When you go to an ATM, you check out at the grocery store, all the way to if you go to Las Vegas and see a slot machine, or you go to a hospital and you see an MRI machine. If you go to a factory floor, the industrial robots, all those things run an embedded operating system in some form. And so they're growing and growing. They're growing in sophistication and power to the point where more and more enterprises are using them for critical business operations. It could be a retailer that gets all their transactions and revenues through point-of-sale systems. It could be a financial firm that does billions of dollars of trades through thin clients. Those are two examples. Obviously, hospitals rely on embedded devices, not only for thin clients to manage their data, but also a lot of medical equipment as well. So if you don't have embedded devices, chances are you will soon. And what we're finding is because they're being relied upon more and more, these enterprises want to manage them just like they do servers and PCs, because they're becoming that integrated into their environment. So I'd like to kind of explain how we see the embedded market in terms of management. Obviously, there's the IT administrator in the enterprise, and they manage servers and PCs. But what we've found is that there's also a lot of common embedded devices they feel comfortable managing. Those could be thin clients, point of service, digital signage. And those devices tend to be consistent from industry to industry. You could be a retailer, a financial services firm, a telecom company. All those devices are going to be relatively similar regardless of what industry you are. And on the other hand, there's much more specialized devices. It could be industrial robots or an MRI machine. Now, those devices are specialized to the point where the IT admin isn't necessarily going to want to be responsible for the uptime. Now, they might want to assign network permissions or something like that, but if an industrial robot or an MRI machine goes down, they want the OEM who has that specialized knowledge to go and service that and create the uptime. So we've seen kind of two different camps in terms of the embedded devices. Now, there are some in the middle. Maybe it's an ATM or a kiosk where it could either be the IT administrator in the enterprise or the OEM managing the device. It just kind of depends there what the preference is. So let's talk about some of the challenges of managing embedded devices. And those who have gone through it, some of this might sound very familiar. Now, one of the nice things about an embedded operating system is that it can be very customized. So if you take, let's say, a Windows operating system and you divide it up into maybe a couple hundred different parts, you can pick and choose what parts of the operating system you want to include. If you know your device is never going to print, you can take that functionality out. It reduces the footprint, lowers the power and memory, and basically you can optimize your operating system to reflect what you need that embedded device to do. So because of that, an operating system or an image can vary from device to device, even from the same OEM. One class of thin clients can vary from another class of thin clients from one OEM, or a point of sale, or pretty much any embedded operating system. One of the things that enterprises get is they get an image locked up with this embedded device, and then they want to go manage it, and they want to run software such as System Center Configuration Manager. Well, unless that operating system has the required components in it, the software just won't run. So that's a challenge right there. Sometimes the software needed to manage the device won't run due to the different options that the OEM maybe didn't include. This isn't on purpose, but they just don't know that the enterprise wants to run this type of management software. Another part is if you're familiar with Configuration Manager at all, they have different collections. So you can select all PCs or all servers in a certain data center. And if you try to connect an embedded device into that, it will try to automatically assign that device to a collection. And it could say, well, you're not a PC or a server, so you must be a phone, and send everything into that phone collection. So then the IT administrator has to manually rework those devices and create a different collection outside of that so they can be managed. And Eric will show you an example of that. Don't look worried, Eric. It's in the demo, I promise. He'll show an example of how there are dynamic collections for different types of embedded devices. And anybody here familiar with write filters at all? Yep. So those, you probably see a grimace for those people raising their hands. So enhanced write filters are basically a great way to lock down the device so unauthorized changes can't be made. So let's say you have a device and there's some that have flash memory to increase the reliability because they're going to be out in the field for 10 years and they want to reduce the moving parts. So they put on an enhanced write filter so no changes can be made. So this works really well, but it works so well if you are an IT administrator and you want to remotely access that device and make a change, you're essentially locked out, and it's really difficult to do so. You can try and run some scripts, but that can be challenging. Sometimes you don't know if the scripts are working, if there's a user still on there. You don't really know if it's worked all the time. And so you sometimes have a couple choices. You can not turn on the write filter, which isn't always the best idea. You can try and do it manually, or you can use a solution that maybe is outside of the System Center solution group. So those are some of the challenges, but yet there's a couple more that are just not necessarily due to design, but just the nature of embedded devices. So if you are trying to figure out what capabilities or inventory characteristics the device has, and you have an MRI machine, and you have a thin client, and you have an ATM, they all have different capabilities and characteristics. And you need some way to be able to inventory and understand what devices you have in your network or in your infrastructure and what they're capable of. So that's another challenge that managing embedded devices poses, as well as updating the image or updating the device. As I spoke to earlier, the embedded operating system can be componentized or specialized by OEM or even by device class or model. So a lot of times, those OEMs will create a unique imaging solution to update that device. So if you're an IT administrator, you have 9 different devices from 9 different OEMs, you get 9 different imaging solutions. So that creates yet additional work. So those are some of the challenges of managing an embedded device. And I'd like to just walk you through a simple example. So everybody's familiar with a point of service or point of sale device, let's say a grocery store. So right now, a lot of these aren't fully managed or managed at all. Now, if it goes down, a lot of times the store doesn't know what to do. Maybe they call first level support and they just say, hey, something's going down, the customers are lined up, we're losing sales, there's a blinking light, maybe an error code. They don't have a whole lot of information they can pass on. Now, at some point, the people will try and troubleshoot or escalate, but they don't always have any information really to go on. All they know is the machine's down, people are unhappy, the customers are walking out, their sales are going down, it's costing them money. They can measure that. So they can't really get a lot of information, they can't connect to the device. So usually they have to send out a field engineer or somebody to go out. And that field engineer also doesn't have a whole lot of information. He just knows it's down, get there as soon as you can. Store's unhappy, customers unhappy, we're losing money. So they go out and they have that 80-20 rule. They have a certain set of parts and tools, and hopefully that first time they go out, they can fix most of it. If not, if it's more complicated, well, then they have to come back, and so that machine or that store could be down for a while. So finally, they'll go out there, and hopefully they can fix it the first time. If not, they have to go back. And in this example, maybe it takes 12 hours. Now, this is just a made-up example in terms of 12 hours. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it could take less time. Depends how far away that field engineer is, or if they can even explain what the problem is. And so there has to be a better way. We don't manage servers and PCs this way. We have to be able to manage embedded devices a little better. So here's what we are envisioning. If there is a problem, the software is able to send enough information to where they can identify what the problem is. A lot of times, like with Configuration Manager, they can remotely access, diagnose, and often fix the problem, put the system back up, which is great. That's really the optimal scenario. But that's not always going to be possible. So if they do have to send somebody out, they can send out the field engineer with enough information so they can bring in the right parts, the right tools, and they know what the solution is the first time. So then they can go out there and they can fix it correctly the first time, and the system's up. So in this example, obviously, the time to repair goes down because a lot of times you can remotely fix it. So in this example, we see how there is a better way. So what I'd like to do is then tell you about Windows Embedded Device Manager. And really here is we're extending the capabilities of System Center Configuration Manager 2007 to manage embedded devices. And by these, those are the devices that we find most commonly in enterprises, which are thin clients, point of service, digital signage, and some other Windows embedded devices. Now, the nice thing here is if you already have System Center Configuration Manager, this is a really easy way to extend that capability into embedded devices. And if you're not familiar with System Center, it is an industry-leading enterprise management software. It's used all around the world. It's been, I think, used by or released by us for over 10 years. It's very stable, secure, and scalable. So we talked kind of the challenges. So one of the benefits here is that you can manage embedded devices similar to how you manage PCs and servers. So that means you can update software, send out distributions, really manage your devices just like you do PCs and servers. There's automatic collections for the most common categories of embedded devices, such as thin clients, point of service. You can also create custom collections for unique types of devices you might need to manage. And almost importantly, write filters can be handled automatically. Actually, Eric will give you a demo on that. And because it integrates with System Center, you get an integrated console, basically a single pane of glass. So you can see all the devices that you need to manage in your infrastructure. In addition, there's a lot of flexibility and configuration available to really describe what those embedded devices have in terms of inventory information so you can provision and configure them accurately. And finally, because it's Microsoft, we make it extensible. So we're working closely with embedded OEMs so they can do a few things to help create a great out-of-the-box experience with that embedded device. So one, they can include a lot of inventory information on that device so it is easily discoverable and you can understand what the capabilities it has. In addition, because many OEMs have those custom imaging solutions, we create this plug-in capability so you can use a common UI across multiple devices and multiple categories. So it's really easy to deploy custom imaging solutions from a single UI and a single workstream. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, what are the different devices? What's the operating system? In general, these are the different classes of devices that we support. There's a lot more that are possible, assuming they run these embedded operating systems. So those could be Windows Embedded Standard, point point of service, as well as Windows XP embedded. And so there's a wide variety of devices that can be managed. These are some of the most common ones, and that's why we're referencing them, because these are the ones that we find that embedded. What about embedded compact device? For 2011, we are not supporting the compact operating system. We have a next version that we're evaluating that will be compatible with Configuration Manager 2012. So before we go to Eric and his demo, I just kind of want to go over a couple product details. Again, there's a technical dependency on Configuration Manager 2007. It extends all those great capabilities of management to embedded devices. We allow our OEMs actually to pre-install the software and configure it so you can get a great out-of-the-box experience when you get those embedded devices from your OEM. And it sits on top of the stack, and it integrates really, really easily. So from a licensing and purchase standpoint, it's the same model as Configuration Manager, so it's really easy to buy. It's the same model. However you would purchase Configuration Manager is the same way you can purchase Windows Embedded Device Manager. So with that, I will turn it over to Eric, who will walk you through the demo. Is that the...
All right, so is my microphone on?
All right.
Are we, can somebody hear me? You got me unmuted? Homer. Here we go. All right. How's everybody doing? A little subdued after that demonstration, PowerPoint? Thanks, Robert. I should probably hit the right switch. That would help. All right. So who wants to see a demo? All right. Excellent. So what are we here to show you today? So I'm going to show you Hyper-V. You guys are in the Hyper-V class, right? No? Okay. So let me talk briefly about the scenario that we have. So essentially, we've got it's a Hyper-V environment, similar to what we had set up in the hands-on lab, running SCCM 2007 R2 with SP2. All those letters and numbers put together. That's a prerequisite for Embedded Device Manager 2011. We have a domain controller, and then we have a Windows Embedded Standard 7 thin client virtual image that we have kind of all put together. Pretty basic setup. I'm not going very elaborate here. So essentially what we want to showcase is three primary scenarios, right? So we talked about the ability to show the collections. So we'll show you guys, essentially the intelligent collection add-ins. Because one of the problems is in SCCM so far has been this little collections piece right here that I'm staring at. All systems, Windows 2000, so on and so forth, Windows 7 devices show up, and most embedded devices used to show up as their underlying operating system. So for example, XP Embedded would show up as Windows XP Pro, or Windows Embedded Standard 7 would show up as Windows 7, which was fine until you wanted to deploy Office to all Windows 7 devices, and then you toasted all of the Wes 7 devices you had out in your field. So, the business users get really angry, they throw things at IT, bad news bears, right? So essentially what we have right now is an add-in, and from a collections perspective, for embedded devices. That's our standard SCCM area. You guys are probably... Anybody not accustomed to SCCM at all? Everybody's pretty familiar? Okay, so you guys know all the kind of subtle nuances that SCCM offers. That's supposed to be fixed in 2012. So essentially what we have here is all embedded devices, and they break them down categorically. So like what Robert had alluded to with the three categories, we have our digital signage devices, our handheld devices, which really we don't have any handheld devices. This was running I guess a pre-release version of the product. You like those handheld devices that we don't inventory anymore? That's right, my demo. Anyway, point of service devices and then all thin clients. And essentially, the idea would be is like, say, for example, we're demoing a thin client here. So I would break down, in this thin client, for example, showcases that it's a virtual machine, which is essentially what it is. But for example, you would have all HP thin client model J2XY, all Weiss thin client, and they can break them down by manufacturer and model type so that you can target them very specifically, which of course is critical when I think a gentleman here had asked, I have some business users who are asking, I want to target these devices one day and these other devices the next. This will help you break that down without having to do a lot of scripting and intelligence on the package side. And so, for example, we have our little IDM WES 7 device sitting right here, and it's just, like I said, from as far as everything else that you're accustomed to, all things are the same here. It's just that we are offering the collections. And I'll let that populate for a second. If you guys didn't realize, I was running through the virtual machines like 5 minutes before the session started. So there we go. So we have all of our information respective. And then, of course, the nice part about Embedded Device Manager, too, is it also offers an SDK for either the enterprise or for the OEMs to get and extend that stuff. So if you guys wanted to essentially create some custom categories of solutions that, for whatever embedded device you might design, right? Hey, I want to create a separate collection for that. I can go ahead and extend WEDM to do that for you. So there's some opportunity for enhancements specifically around embedded devices. So, so we showed you the collections part. Apologize for the scaling features here. And then down below, there'll be this little quirky area called Embedded Device Management. And in here, I'll let config man catch up with me. Essentially, we'll show you all the three pieces that are going to be broken in there. And so while that's deciding that it wants to respond to me, there's a couple other things we're going to show you. So we're going to show you how to do a configuration package with task sequences that are going to be managing through the right filters. So let's say, for example, you wanted to deploy some piece of technology or some update or setting change to an embedded device. You've got to manage the right filters. I'll show you guys how to do that. And then essentially what it would look like if I try to deploy an image. So that's probably the part that I'll start with, is the device imaging process. Now, traditionally, what ends up happening is you'll have HP or Weiss or maybe something like that from a thin client perspective, and they offer their own infrastructure to manage the images that they deploy out to those devices. And so, as Robert alluded to, one of the challenges is, how do I manage all of those, right? Do I have to teach all of my IT guys and my SCCM administrators or the package deployers or however you have that split up, all those scenarios? And so the idea is the infrastructure has value to those particular devices. The challenge is we want a central user interface in order to deploy and manage all of that. So that's essentially what SCCM is going to do. It's going to be a plugin and basically be an open view into what those other technologies can do. So I have a simulator running here just for the sake of the demonstration, and right now we are going to we're going to simulate like an HP kind of endpoint, a server that you would use to deploy the thin client. So we could call this, server.hp.com, for example. And then when I go into the actual deployment process, I say, okay, I got a new image from HP to deploy to these 1,000 thin clients. How do I go ahead and do that? So I right-click here, and you see that I already got a few deployed. And essentially, to go through the new deployment feed, the new image deployment, right-click, new image deployment, and then I have this screen here. And so we're going to call it, new HP. I cannot type today. Thin client deployment. And you might say it's, model XYZ. Fine. In this case, you'll use the device imaging component. Now, we have a plugin to do this from a virtual perspective, but essentially you would have some plugin that would allow you to do this from the OEM's perspective. We're going to find my image. In this case, I've got a VHD file that I'm going to use to distribute out to that drive. And then I'm going to find my deployment server. And if you remember, we did that little server.hp.com. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to choose where my collections are. So I could, for example, go down and dig in a little bit here, and I'm going to say I want all thin client devices to get that image. Now, interestingly enough, that plugin, this little EN down here is just for the sake of example, but if you've got 4 or 5 different plugins, that little graphic could change to represent the logo of the manufacturer. So it's kind of an IQ to help you understand, okay, which one am I playing with right now? Am I going to deploy an image to the wrong devices? You can shoot yourself in the foot if you're not careful with anything in SCCM, so we try to offer some protection. We click next, we decide when we're going to do the deployment start, and so on and so forth. Next, confirm everything, and then finish. And then, of course, you see here our new image, and usually it takes some time, and I can oftentimes restart the service and it'll pop up in that little simulator. If it doesn't, we'll just move on. So incidentally, when Enterprise Device Manager is installed, it installs two main services on the server. Those are the ones that you're looking at right now. This device imaging service is essentially what does all that imaging processing. And by restarting it sometimes, for the sake of the demo, because things in SCCM take a little while to trickle out, I'm trying to accelerate it so you're not sitting here for 25 minutes going, that's nice, great demo, it's not doing anything. So if we're lucky, it'll do it. If it's not, we'll just still trying to start here for a second. Oh, by the way, so we ordered chocolates for everybody, and so there's a box sitting next to a guy back there that he's probably got his hand in of little foil-covered chocolates right there. You all are happy to take like a handful of them if you want. They ended up giving us more than there are attendees at TechEd. So how's that for planning, right? So feel free to take, and they're little Windows embedded ones, little foil. They have a little Microsoft tag on them. Give them to your friends. Freeze them, give them away at Christmas. Whatever you want to do. And let's see if our demo people are, no, they're not. Okay. Well, we'll just leave it at that then. So the idea would be is essentially here we would be able to see the deployment of the image take place. You guys got the idea from the perspective of how do I create an image, how do I deploy it, how do I manage it. Do I have two consoles open? Oh, that would explain why. Yeah. Rule 427 about SCCM, don't have two consoles open. So the other demo's been actually pretty decent at TechEd so far, or they've all blown up like mine? It's just me. All right, well, that's good to know. At least you guys are honest. Okay, so just as a rehash real quick, you see the images that I deployed. Pretty standard stuff, and of course I can, modify I can suspend or terminate those particular deployments out to those devices. You can go ahead and verify, once again, and of course, the nice part is the server change, I could go ahead and change that here if I decided that I wanted to change the server. So the fun part is managing the write filters. So typically when we want to make a device configuration change, you got to do it in steps, right? I got to figure out the piece that I want to do, then I got to create a package, and I have to advertise said package, right? It's this three-step multitude of process. So we're going to go ahead and go through a configuration item, and I already have some up there, but once again, try to have things already prepped up so that when we have something new, it doesn't take a half hour to replicate out to the device. We should be able to show that to you guys immediately. But essentially, if I want to do a new configuration item, and let's just say, I don't know, we're just going to do a new HPTC configuration item, very specific. Now, you have some control over the one. Now, remember I talked about the SDK. These are out-of-the-box functions that you guys can change specifically when it comes to an embedded device, things that are important. So I can make Internet Explorer changes right off the bat. I can make some password setting changes, RDP. So we'll go through these really quick. So for example, in the Internet Explorer wizard, I've got the ability to change things like add URLs, default intranet site, manage things like pop-up blocker, homepage, so on and so forth. I can also add trusted sites to this. So I can modify some of those things on an embedded device where they would be doing web browsing. From password perspective, now one of the things you'll notice, why password settings here? Well, not every, and usually not every, embedded device participates in Active Directory. So you can't necessarily assume group policies are being enforced. So how do you take care of some basic group policy-like settings? Well, I want to make sure I enforce passwords in particular. So that's why that's included here as a embedded option. And so I can take care of logon attempts, password activity, history, so on and so forth. That would then be enforced on a local group policy on that device. RDP connection. This is important because when you think about thin clients, right, what are they typically doing? Well, RDP connection to something, right? So I want to make sure I'm able to enforce the policy for that as well. And so I can set up automatically, through this, I have one RDP setting, and then, hey, maybe we're going to change over to a new server infrastructure. I can push out those settings with Wedum. Registry settings. Now, this has got, opportunities plenty, whether you're using this as an indexing opportunity, right? Hey, I want to do some weird collections with SCCM, and I want these registry flags to be set so I know something applied. Well, you can do that. Maybe you need some tweaks and hacks to be enforced or whatnot. So a lot of these can be managed automatically. So registry key is a great opportunity. VPN, once again, if you're going to try to connect from a network device, being able to manage the VPN technology. And then, of course, Wi-Fi, which allows you to manage the SSID, the authentication mechanisms, and so on and so forth. So for the sake of the experiment here, we're just going to go ahead and do a home page and point this directly to the SCCM server. As you guys know, SCCM comes default with that little IIS 7 webpage, right? So the idea we're going to show that real quick. Okay, and then we'll turn on pop-up blocker. Fine. Excellent. So I created that. Incidentally, it probably would help you if you understood what a right filter. Anybody? You're probably not very familiar with right filters. Anybody not familiar or ever seen a right filter execute? What happens with right filters? No? Okay. Let's show you what happens with right filters. Okay. So this is my WES-box, Windows Embedded Standard 7 WES. Everything's acronymed at Microsoft, right? So for right now, I have a device, and let's just show you really quick. I've got Internet Explorer. Goes to it's a blank home page. I have somewhere in here, pop-up blocker, I think, turned off. Yes, pop-up blocker's turned off. And let's go to the registry. And someone's knocking on the ceiling. It's a washing machine. Good call. That's exactly what it sounds like, with a bad pair of jeans on one side hitting to the sides, right? All right, and then we have this EDM key that I put in here, and it's blank so far, right? So essentially what I could do, just for the sake of argument, let's create a new string value, test, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to redirect this to HTTP test. And then I'm going to turn on the pop-up blocker. In here somewhere. Here it is. All right. So to confirm, just so you guys verify, I made all those changes. And the idea with the right filter is if the right filter, things aren't committed to the hard drive, it's this intermediary layer between the OS and the hardware. And the right filter, if you don't commit certain things, when those changes are made, next time you reboot them, they've been flushed from the device, which is, in fact, what you want to do in an embedded device a lot of times. And how do you manage those right filters is often the challenge that we're trying to solve. So as you saw here, test came up. That's my change to verify. Now let's go ahead and reboot the device. And I'll show you what happens when that reboots. Shocking. All right, so while that's rebooting, we'll go back. We finished our configuration item process here. And we see that we have this new HPTC configuration item. You can verify all of that. You see that my Internet Explorer settings here are for HTTP, IDM, SCCM. Okay, so then let's go ahead and create. Now I have a registry key thing here I had created. Let's just duplicate that for the sake of the demo. And I'm going to go to the properties here. And we're going to call this, and then we're going to go to the registry, and I don't know, we can call this something fun, whatever. And we can say this key was updated Tuesday afternoon. And I'm just going to do this little EDM key that I showed you guys in the registry on the other device. All right. So WES is probably back up. Here we are. I have it set to auto log on. That's why you didn't see me log on as anybody. And let's go back to Internet Explorer. And oh, look at that. Right back to the blank page. We'll confirm that my privacy settings pop-up blocker is turned off again. And if I go to the registry editor, you see that that key that I created before is gone, right? So those three changes that I made are vanished. This is one of the value adds of embedded with right filters. So you guys can kind of see what that means. And so imagine, just for the sake of argument, if you didn't know how to manage right filters and you installed Office or a new version of Internet Explorer or some point-of-sale app, oh, guess what happens? Maybe it'll reboot, maybe it'll install fine, and then next reboot it installs again, and then again, and then again, and again, until you manage the right filters, which is intentionally what you want it to do. So this is designed for those kiosk scenarios or scenarios where you don't want anybody making a change point of sale, some digital sign that's interactive in a store or whatnot. Okay, so you guys saw that I made all those changes and it went back. And so now we're going to go back to my configuration items. And so from configuration items, the next thing we do is make a package. Obviously, you guys saw that I made some packages already, so we're going to go ahead and do this one again for the lab. All right. So what am I going to put in there? So what configuration items can I throw in there? It'll go through SCCM and inventory that quite quickly. Maybe not so quickly. So am I holding you guys up from beers? Is that what this session is all about right now, right? Mixed drinks? You guys can be honest. It's okay. I mean, what's that? I'm sorry? Not till 6:15. Okay, you're like, now between now and 6:15, if you're not done on time, then you're toasty. So one of the interesting things is, so when I install Embedded Device Manager on the clients, right? So there's two ways to do this. I can obviously do it manually, or I ideally would push it out with SCCM, right? And that's kind of what SCCM is there for. One of the interesting things is I can it'll either auto detect, or I can set on purpose the category of the device. So if it doesn't know what device category it is, you can choose when it installs. Is this a thin client, point of sale device, digital sign, or other? And so that way, when I'm showing the configuration items for particular types, I can target those appropriately. So just as an FYI. So in this case, we're talking about a thin client, and we have this HP and thin client configuration and registry update that we made the changes. And this is the Internet Explorer settings and the reg keys that we talked about. Click next, finish done, usually most steps in Microsoft, right, with wizards. And we'll confirm that we have the package, which is right there. All right, great, fantastic. Now, I have a question from somebody. Yes, sir. So the question was, just for the sake of the audio, how do I use SCCM and Embedded Device Manager to detect what kind of device it was? Is that correct? So there's two possible ways, right? Either A, when I install the client, I can kind of force what that agent can be installed as, or B, typically when I get it from an OEM, they may set a flag somewhere with that agent already pre-installed. So a lot of times going forward, just so you guys know, is that there's two things. You'll be able to deploy it out to existing devices, but we're also having OEMs pre-populate that data ahead of time when you procure them. That would be during the actual Embedded Device Manager agent installation process. It'll set flags in a registry that we can then pull up on. I'm sorry, the question? Could you have more categories? Essentially, I guess, yeah, you could. I mean, if you leverage the SDK, you could essentially create additional categories. But these are what we kind of targeted out of the box. And keep in mind, the OS doesn't change. The support of the OS does not change. It's just simply the category of that OS in that particular design. No. The question was, what's my method of interrogating the device? And so there are some flags, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not exactly sure what flags they are, that will, if I automatically install the device, I can set some flags during installation to tell it if it's a thin client or some other device. If I do it manually, I can pick and choose that during the installation process on the client. And if it comes from the OEM, they can already have that pre-populated ahead of time. There was another question, sir? Does it support distribution points or remote distribution points in the sense that the package will then push out or synchronize with the distribution point? Yes, so the answer to your question would be yes. We essentially, the architecture for SCCM does not change at all with Embedded Device Manager. We're simply just enhancing the discoverability functionality and the deployment functionality. So the ability for me to deploy and monitor, it leverages the exact same infrastructure of SCCM. There's nothing additional or less that's taken place. So if you have management points or distribution points in your environment that you're leveraging architecturally, we'll be able to manage those because they're all talking into the same SCCM situation. For the sake of the demo, I don't have any distribution points other than the single primary site that I have set up. Yes, I could get more elaborate, but my SCCM ninja skills are not that good. Okay, we have our configuration package, and we have the option, of course, to add or remove items, but we're going to advertise to a device and create a new advertisement. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is anytime you do anything with embedded, granted, I could create advertisements and packages elsewhere at SCCM. When I create them through this little embedded piece here, we throw this little warning up here and saying, Warning, 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 Will Robinson. Disabling a right filter may leave your device vulnerable. And intentionally, in order to make sure that no unnecessary things are being committed, we have to mandatorily do a restart. So what you saw that I did with the device was I restarted the device and it flushed the memory from the right filter perspective. At which time, when the right filter is flushed, reboots, then it'll go ahead and actually apply all the changes that I made because it knows it has a known state at that point. It'll make all those applications, and then it'll restart again to re-enable the right filter. So there's a 2 restart process in this. Yes, I already answered your question. Hey, you got it, exactly. But the point is we want to make sure people understand this because it's new to the SCCM world when they deal with right filters. I'm sorry, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, there are 2 kinds of right filters. Will it take care of both of them? I believe so, yes. Correct, yeah, for EWF and FBWF. So yes, yeah, both the right filters will be taken care of via this. Okay, so yes, I understand what I'm doing. Click next. And then I'm going to say new thin client update advertisement. Do you guys talk to yourselves when you write stuff too, sometimes like I do? Is that usually what everybody does? All right. Alrighty then. So we're going to choose my devices. I'm just going to click all embedded devices for the sake of argument here. And then include all members of my sub-collections, which is fine. Click next. I'm going to determine, I'm going to click all my buttons, right? Hey, ignore my maintenance window and make sure it's high priority and all those other fun things, whatever. Click next, next. Go ahead and do my advertisement process, and boom, there we are. So now if I go down to my right filter servicing situation, you should see all advertisements with right filter handling. Keep in mind, not all advertisements, just advertisements with right filter handling. You might have 1,000 advertisements going on in SCCM. You don't care about that except for the ones that have to deal with right filters when it comes to embedded devices. You are eagerly asking questions, sir. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you go from configuration to package to advertisement. Probably, but I'm not sure. So typically in SCCM, we manage that through like maintenance windows. That's typically how you manage that, right? So you usually can't say, if Bob is not busy, do something. Typically what happens is when an advertisement comes up in a device, it doesn't go ahead and just shut down the system and lock out the user. It usually says, hey, by the way, you're going to get a distribution in some point in time. Do you want to execute now or do you want to postpone it? But 24-hour period, right, exactly. And I can set that during my advertisement process. And then, of course, when that's actually in the midst of doing something, I can't. Now, typically, most organizations say, I'm going to distribute it during a maintenance window, which might be from midnight to 6 a.m., and then give that option that says, if anybody happens to be using it, suppress it for at least 24 hours kind of thing. That would be how you could get around that. But that's native to SCCM. That's not necessarily native to Embedded Device Manager. Good question, though. Okay, so we went ahead and made our advertisement. So now you see this little thin client device that I've gone up in here and showed. Once again, you can kind of get data. Here's my scheduling ability. And to your point, I said as soon as possible is one of the things I could also modify when I disable, when I go ahead and distribute this. Information about my distribution points, security, yada, yada. You guys kind of, standard things apply here from SCCM. And of course, when I go back up to the software distribution piece, because I filtered down below, this is going to show up as an advertisement in the rest of my advertisements collection, right? So packages and advertisements will show up as this thing churns. Excellent. So there are my I've only made advertisements in this demo for the sake of Embedded Device Manager, but you would see all of them as well as all the representative packages that go in there. So now that it's advertised, we would love to see it kick off. So for the sake of argument, I've already done a little homework here. Hopefully this will run. This is where my demo guys are going to be my buddy today. So I use the SCCM extensions, the console extensions that you guys can download third party and to rerun my advertisement. And I'm just going to pick an advertisement that doesn't want to talk to my device. Did it come up? Let's try this again. Excellent. Usually there's an advertisement that shows up there. How about my demos? I'm sorry, what's that? You can? Excellent. I got to work on my SCCM ninja skills. So anyway, that's fantastic. This is what I worked on most of the afternoon to make sure that worked. But essentially what would end up happening is that would advertise, make the changes, and you guys would see it all locked down and wonderful. So I'm curious, what the heck is going on? Yeah, I was having networking issues before, so I just wanted to verify that I haven't gone through any other weird stuff, because that would just be my luck today. I can go into control panel, you're correct. The challenge was I had issues with the demo this afternoon with regards to networking and the write filters. And so I had to mitigate those before I could do that. But okay, so I'm going to go to control panel for you, and you want me to open up the SCCM configuration manager device agent here. Actions, which one? There we go. All right. So this is interactive Q&A. Yeah, this is the challenge with the situation. The challenge was I had these little advertisements working before. I'm kind of shocked. Nice. Well, there you go. All right. Well, we'll see if it comes up or not. Right, and I had them run this afternoon. That's why it was, the idea being is if they had already run, I could kick them back off again in an instantaneous section for the purposes of the demo. Right, but I had old ones before. So the point of demos is you kind of pre-stage things ahead of time so that you can execute on them, and then, there's nobody live demos SCCM except for me. So I'm going to tap dance now. All right, so essentially what you've got there is, so we saw that part, which would have, and I know this works, and in the hands-on lab, it's actually all working really, really well. So I recommend you guys go through the hands-on lab and the magic will happen. My luck, at the end of this conversation, it'll go, ooh, advertisement, and make the change. So just imagine that's going to happen. But you guys get the idea. In the real-world scenario, this stuff works. It's not anything magical. It just doesn't do pretty in 5 minutes of demo. So the other, let's see, if we talked about configuration packages, write filters, just verifying I have anything else to talk about. No. So I think we're good. So we showed you, or we would have showed you, Kong usually goes through this much slower than I do. So we tried to show you the image deployment piece, but you guys got the idea from the image deployments here that I talked about with regard to deploying a new image to the device. There is the configuration items that we made modifications to. There are the configuration packages that we then created, and then we went ahead and made our advertisements appropriately. And you saw all of those right there. So I think I'll hand it back over to you, Mr. Peterson. Okay, well, so should we go back to the, which one is it for the deck?
As far as embedded devices, any particular CE, XP, that's all of them, right?
So no compact, no CE.
Yeah, let's.
So the question was, for the sake of the audio, and I have to remember doing a better job of this, is CE or compact supported? And the answer is no. And these are your standard configured today. Now we're investigating what we're going to do for the future because we run into this interesting challenge about the future version of SCCM coming out, and so making sure we do things that make sense between this version and the next version.
But just to highlight why, well, one, the list of operating systems that this product supports is listed up here: Windows XP Embedded, WES 2009, WES 7, the point of service variants as well. But just to kind of go through why did we come up to this scenario was really, as we explained earlier, what we were trying to do is understand of the users of System Center right now, there's a huge number of enterprises that are using it right now, and they have a lot of embedded devices they want to manage. So we talked to those embedded device OEMs as well as the enterprises, and we found that the most common devices were thin clients, point of service, ATMs, kiosks, at some point some handheld as well. And so those were the operating systems that drove those devices. Right. It's not to say that there aren't a whole lot of CE or compact-based devices out there, but what we found was the overwhelming majority, or the feedback that we got, was that these are the devices that they want to manage right now. They've been asking for years and years to do that, especially if they have write filters. It's not to say that CE or compact devices aren't important or that we don't want to support them, but that was the feedback that we got. So as Eric mentioned, we are working hand in hand with the configuration or system center team. They're going to be releasing 2012. Our next version is going to complement that. And so that's where we're evaluating what enhancements or additions to include in the support.
Because there's a lot of fun things happening in 2012 too, right, around mobile device management, that kind of stuff. So, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel and irritating customers about, I have this product and this product, what am I supposed to do with that?
Is this product ready to go with Configuration Manager 2012?
No, 2007.
2007.
R2 SP2
Yeah.
today, as of April 1st.
2012 isn't out yet, so.
Yeah, that's true.
When
Yeah.
how far we follow?
How far will we follow
When will
past,
Configuration Manager 2012.
past Configuration Manager
Well,
2012?
I can tell you it won't be released at the same time. I know it will be later. How much later, I don't know. Yeah, to be honest, our engineering team is working with theirs. We're still evaluating kind of the scope of the features and all that. So I honestly can tell you I don't know.
Pick a number. So this is a great time to talk about questions. Do I need additional server hardware to run?
Nope.
No. It's essentially you install it right on top of the same server roles you have in SCCM. So if you've got primary and secondary site servers, they all get populated with that. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Earlier in your demo, you were showing the VHD.
Yeah,
Was that typically just for
the demo.
patchwork update, or could you potentially use this tool to push an entire VHD image, probably let's say the single app?
So the question is the VHD simply an update or is it the entire OS? So traditionally at least in the thin client space, usually when you got a new image, it came as a holistic, full-blown image. Usually as an OEM, they don't just give you updates. They usually, if you're going to get a new, for example, I've got a new service pack to an image, or I've got a whole brand new operating system. Hey, we went from WES 2009 to WES 7 for our thin clients. You're supported, so here you go. In that case, they're going to give you typically some type of image. And it could be a VHD file because we support booted VHD in all the Windows 7 technology. It probably is more likely some type of WIM file or some other type of file that they would then use as part of their imaging process. I just use the VHD for the sake of the demonstration, but you could essentially use a VHD in those situations. Good question. I'm sorry, say that again? It could reflash. So the question is, does that reflash the OS? It could reflash the OS. Now, keep in mind, in a lot of the embedded devices, with the exception of most compact, most of the Windows Embedded Standard devices, XP Embedded and so forth, used actual local storage, whether that was some type of flash card, hard drive, or whatnot. Most of them, they had local storage. The question is how big. So we weren't really writing to EEPROM or SOC or any of that kind of stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
So I'm sorry. So you said, is it a plug-in to SCCM? But you missed the beginning of this. So you have to come back out and come back in. No, okay. So yes, it is it's an extension for SCCM. So it'll sit on top of SCCM. It does not live outside the SCCM world by itself. Has it? I'm sorry. You might have to scream at me.
You must know if it's a different client than the SCCM client.
Is it a different client than the SCCM client? It is an additional client on top of the SCCM client. So there'd be two agents on that device.
But they work very closely together. But there is a technical dependency upon SCCM 2007.
I know it's not clean and pretty, but that's the way it is.
We didn't want to reinvent the wheel.
Because then we would have to wait till for SCCM 2012. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Will there be a client-side API for the additional service or agent?
Is there a client-side API for the client-side agent? So help me understand, API to do the extensions we talked about?
That I'm able to interact from my application with the agent,
I don't know, is there?
the embedded agent.
That's a good question.
I have no idea. I know there's an SDK for the server side,
Yeah.
so you understand what's being, I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you. That'd be good to find out. If you really, I mean, we can follow up with you offside, and we can try to get you investigated information for you. Stump the chump, right? Is that how this works? So good job. The demos did it. You did it. Congratulations. You win a candy bar. Yeah, where's the beer? All right, so what else? Yes, sir.
Are there any limitations on the service packs for the embedded OS, like XP?
Good question. Not that I know of.
I mean, would an OS service pack somehow inhibit this?
Or does it require a service pack 3?
You mean for the actual agent OS? So for example, like in WePause, right, do I need SP3 to do management of this? And I don't think that's the case.
No, but it's helpful to have the most current in general, yes. But again, one of the things that the Windows Embedded group does is it works directly with a lot of these OEMs. So we're helping them actually understand how this helps basically all the parties involved, including the OEMs. So they know that they're going to be asked often to say, hey, can you give me an updated image for this embedded device so we can run this software?
Yeah, in fact, the only OS where that would even be a problem would be WePause, because there were 2 service pack revisions since it launched. And then BizPause Ready 2009, WES 2009 all came out with SP3 for XP, and then Service Pack 1 for WES 7. So yeah, we probably need to find out about the WePause stuff. Other questions? Yes, oh, please. You were shaking your hand up there.
Can you push out security updates for the OS with it?
Yes. So that would be, so your question is, can I push out security updates? Assuming they apply, which is a whole different topic about embedded management. But yeah, you could manage the right filter process through that.
Did they go through WSUS?
So you can obviously do security management patching through SCCM when you distribute it. And I believe you have the option of adding a task sequence directly to those patches. And so you would just add a task sequence that has the embedded right filter piece and put them together in a package, right? Because you saw that when I created those items separately, those task sequences that were managing the embedded right filter, you could add them to other packages if I wanted to. I just created them down below. Yes, sir.
What are the needs you use to turn on the right filters? Is it a script or?
It's magic, actually, is how we turn off the
Yeah.
right filters. Yeah. See, if we gave away the secret sauce, it wouldn't be secret anymore, now would it? No, there's just some back-end logic that goes ahead programmatic. You can manage the right filters yourselves programmatically. The challenge is nobody ever wants to do that because it's a pain. Because essentially in an embedded device, you have to not only turn off the right filter, flush it, turn it off, deploy, turn it back on. And the challenge is, how do you have that state visibility during the entire reboot process that we talked about? And it's difficult when you're talking about executing content locally, or if you've got some third-party management, you got to go through some really big steps to make that happen.
Yeah, I know that, but my question, Target, if it would be a PowerShell script, I would have a PowerShell dependency on my embedded device. Then I don't have a PowerShell.
As far as I know, it's not a PowerShell dependency.
No. To be honest, I don't know the actual technical process they created, the right filter handling. I can tell you it was very complex, and it took our engineers a long time to perfect. I don't believe there is a PowerShell dependency. And as Eric said, there are ways to create scripts to turn it off and then to make a change. One of the challenges that enterprises have told us is, yes, we can do this, but it's a manual process. We don't know always if it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. And then there's really no way to understand, did it work across all the devices? And then we have to basically go and check, which really doesn't save us a whole lot of time.
And then, of course, the other question is, well, why can't I do this with SCCM, which they've been asking us, or insert your product of choice from a management perspective, right? So obviously our management product is SCCM, so that's why we added it in there. So, but there's a lot of documentation online about how to do command management of the right filters. Well, I bet you have. That's why you're asking the questions. There were some other questions? No? Nothing else? I think you mentioned something back there. Oh, okay, good. I just want to make sure everybody's covered.
Oh.
Yes, sir?
I'm going to
Ask the question.
Along the same lines, specifically with embedded products from an OEM. If I'm pushing, let's say, something to a device that is EWS enabled, and you commit to that, is there any mitigation considerations
I mean, during this process, if the machine just turned off or something like that, is a recovery or a? Yeah.
The recovery mechanism if for some reason your image failed.
You know, that's a good question. I know somebody asked that I believe yesterday about what happens. The process works, but if the machine like loses power in the middle of it, what happens?
Basically lost your CCM engine, right?
Yeah. To be honest, I don't know we can follow up, but I don't know the exact answer to that.
I mean, logically, right, we can verify, but I mean, once again, this isn't anything outside of the SCCM process, right? So the nice thing about the way the advertising packages go is you push out an advertisement, that client goes, oh, I have these things I need to do. And then it tries to execute on those things and verify that those things have been executed on. The only time the reboots happen is to turn off and flush the filter, turn it off, and then turn it back on. And so if something happens between the turning off and turning on the right filter, I would say probably the worst thing you might have is a right filter situation. But
Or for that matter, if you push the wrong image, for example, oh my God, that's not appropriate.
yeah, don't do that. Don't push out the wrong image. Yeah, I mean, essentially, and that's the other thing, too, is, I mean, think about if you push out an image to a Windows 7 client. I mean, the same process that, you push it out, and it's like the last thing you want to do is, hey, in the middle of this, pull the power. That's not necessarily the greatest idea, but there are ways to work around it. You just might wind up with a brick box that you have to go manually intervene with. Everybody's nodding their head like, yeah, dude, we've been through that. Was this okay? You guys get some information you needed out of this? The hands-on labs, I highly recommend. As far as, there are some other sessions that you might find interesting. Where are we?
I don't think it's on there.
Are you really? You didn't do one of the good decks with the other? That's great, Robert. I'm sorry, there's a session tomorrow. Okay, on Wes 7. So, there you go. There's a session tomorrow on Windows Embedded Standard 7. And then otherwise, we had our sessions already, today being the last one for the day.
All sessions have been recorded, so you can access them as soon as they're published.
Excellent. Well, I will let you be with 12 minutes to spare. Thank you very much, folks.